Welcome to a deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a really fascinating corner of literary history, the Edo period in Japan.
Yeah.
We've got an incredible source today, excerpts from an essay called Edo's Literary Alchemy, Haikai Transformation, and the Art of Allusion. This piece, written by Ishikawa Jun during World War II, it's a classic, really, of modern Japanese literary criticism. And it gets into the thought patterns of the people of Edo.
And what's so interesting here, I think, is that while it's talking about Edo literature on the surface, implicitly it's a critique of modern Japanese literary realism. That's shijitsu shugi.
Okay.
Ishikawa was basically suggesting that, the Edo period held these alternative ways of seeing, of creating ways our modern world has, largely forgotten.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So he's kind of saying, hey, look back at these amazing Edo techniques because they offer a different path, different from like the conventional realism that really dominated modern literature.
Precisely. And he calls these techniques the 5 conversion devices of Haikai transformation. Or
Haikaika.
Haikaika, right. We're going to dive into a few of the really vivid ones today, like zokuka, that's vernacularization, popularization, and yatsushi, which means lowly disguise.
That's it. And a really critical point to get right from the start is how the Edoites saw practice susa and thought shiso.
Okay.
For them, theory and practice, they were identical, just one thing.
Right.
Which is, a far cry from how we tend to split the two.
Yeah, definitely.
And this isn't just some academic point. Ishikawa argues it's central to understanding their profound wisdom, their secret art of living.
Yeah.
And that it can still speak to us.
So our mission today, then, is to explore these Haikai transformation techniques. We'll use some really vivid examples from the source.
And see what they tell us about Edo thought. And maybe, just maybe, find some surprising insights for ourselves, too. Okay, let's jump into our first example.
Okay.
It's pretty wild. Our sources drop us right into an Edo period urban legend about a servant girl named Otake.
Otake.
There's even a Senryu poem quoted about her. It goes, Sakuma no Sakuma servant girl with her gilded hair that many know to be quite kinky down there. Come knocking on her back door. He is told she rode out on an elephant the day before last. That's quite something. It definitely doesn't pull any punches. You could almost picture the reactions in an Edo tea house, can't you?
Absolutely. And that poem, despite the, the crude humor, it's actually a brilliant example of zokuka and yatsushi.
Oh, so?
Well, the gilded hair, Hakutsuki no Chijirigami, it refers to the Dainichi Nyorais, the great Sun Buddha's curled hair, which signifies enlightenment.
Okay.
But Hakutsuki also means notorious. And it plays on this popular belief that girls with curly pubic hair were, more amorous.
Oh, wow. Okay, so, wait. This ordinary maid, Otake, she's being linked to the highest divinity in esoteric Buddhism, Dainichi Nyorai.
Yeah.
How does that even work? That seems like such a huge leap. What does that say about their tolerance for paradox?
That's a great question. And it's not a simple one-to-one comparison. It's more layered.
Okay.
Well, see, the Otake legend is deeply tangled up with older classical stories. Specifically, there's a 15th century Newt play, Eguchi, by Zyami, and even older tales about the monk Segyu and a harlot of Eguchi.
Right.
And that harlot. She was revealed to be the Bodhisattva Fugen Busatsu, who flies off on a white elephant.
Ah, the elephant. Okay, I see the connection now.
Exactly. So the Edoites, they sort of decoded this ancient story and, merged it with their everyday lives. They created new meaning through this kind of layering.
So Otake's story, how does it really embody zokuka then? Beyond just making something popular?
Well, zokuka, the vernacularization bit, it's described as a double operation. On one level, it transforms the historical Heian-era harlot into Otake, this contemporary figure. Otake becomes her quotidian symbol.
Her everyday stand-in, kind of.
Right. But on another level, it works like a mandala almost. Otake is what you see with your eyes open, but Dainichi Nyorai, that's revealed when your eyes are closed. It's the mechanism, the way a humble scullion gets revealed as this universal figure, albeit in yatsushi, that lowly disguise.
Right.
The whole Otake legend, Ishikawa argues, is a yatsushi of the Buddhist doctrine of dependent origination.
So through this pretty raunchy urban legend, we're actually seeing that profound wisdom Ishikawa mentioned.
Exactly. The Edoites' ability to find universal truth, not in some dry philosophy textbook, but woven right into the fabric of everyday, even crude life. It was unthinkable for them to have a system of thought that didn't connect symbolically to their daily lives.
That makes perfect sense. And just quickly, another concept you mentioned earlier was mitaté, analog parody.
Yeah.
How does that fit in?
Yeah, mitaté is definitely related. It wasn't the main focus with Otake, but it's often about those witty juxtapositions.
Like a visual pun?
Sort of, yeah. Recontextualizing something classical in a modern, often funny way. It's part of the same toolkit.
Okay, so this whole idea of Haikai transformation, it sounds like it runs through all of Edo literature, like a completely different way of creating things than we might expect.
Oh, absolutely. And the source argues that's why modern critics often, miss the point. They try to apply modern theories to literature that was almost designed to resist them. Ishikawa says we need to focus on their specific sutta, their creative practices.
You mentioned earlier how Senryu and kyōka were often seen as like lowbrow compared to Bosch's haikai, the high orthodox stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the source really pushes back on that. Says it's mistaking the barley for the beans. So what's the real story there?
Yeah, that conventional view. It's pretty much wrong, according to Ishikawa. The real evolution of Haikai transformation wasn't some straight line down. It sparked in the Edo streets, sure, but it was carried to new heights through these bold new inventions in form. And it all culminated in the kyōka poetry of the Tenmei-era. That's about 1781 to 88.
Tenmei-kyōka. So that was something really special. How did it work? Specifically using another of those conversion devices, honkadori.
Right, honkadori. That's allusive variation, but specifically on an earlier classical waka poem.
Okay, Japanese poetry.
Japanese court poetry, yeah. And lots of individual kyōka poems used honkadori. The source gives examples, like one by Yamate no Shirohito, another older one. But what made Tenmei-kyōka so groundbreaking, especially Shokusenjin's anthology, the Mad Poems, was that it wasn't just individual poems using honkadori.
No.
The entire collection was a haikaization of a classical waka anthology, specifically the Kokinchu.
Whoa, okay. That's a massive step. So not just referencing bits and pieces, but reimagining an entire foundational text.
Exactly. That's a level of engagement. Yeah, like you said, we don't often see that today. It was the first movement in Japanese vernacular poetry that really tried to resuscitate and transform the very spirit of the Kokinchu.
And that makes sense why they picked the Kokinchu.
Totally. Because the Kokinchu wasn't just some dusty old book. It was common knowledge in Edo. It was, flowing through the city streets, resonating with people.
And you're saying this all traces back somehow to Basho, his Haikai Renga in the Genroku era.
Yes. Ishikawa argues that Bosch's sort of accidental discovery applying Haikai transformation to courtly Renga poetry, that paved the way.
Okay.
But then, while Bosch's Haikai became the sort of elegant orthodoxy, Tenmei-kyōka became the vulgar heterodoxy.
Yeah.
But crucially, this shift wasn't a decline. It was another process of zokuka, that vernacularization, popularization, leading to this drastic shift in the whole poetic essence, from Basho to Nunpo.
Nunpo, who was also Shokusanjin.
Right, one of his many names.
Okay. This shift in poetic essence, it makes me wonder about the poets themselves. The source says these Tenmei-kyōka masters were different in their authorial personality. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, this is fascinating. It's about how the meaning of their aliases, their wild aliases, kyume, completely changed.
Changed how?
Well, earlier kyūka poets, even with aliases, you could still kind of sense a recognizable personality behind them.
Okay.
But the Tenmei masters, they were described as unrecognizable personalities. Mumei jinkaku. Think of them like the composer's unknown. Yomibiro shirazu you find in ancient waka anthologies.
Wow, so the author just vanished, leaving only, what did it say, fleeting shadows.
Exactly. It went even further than Basho, who could make you forget the author's name once the poem's world took over. The compilers of the Mad Poems, they built their entire world on the renunciation of the author's name.
Renunciation.
Yeah. The source says the poet's stage name plays tricks on you. You try to grab hold, but you're just clutching vainly at mere shadows.
That sounds like a radical departure from how we usually think about art today, right?
Totally.
Was this rejection of the author's ego just a kyōka thing? Or was it maybe a broader feeling in Edo literary culture? It feels like a direct challenge to our modern, very author-centric way of reading.
It is, precisely. And the source argues exactly that. Viewing traditional Japanese poetry through our modern author-centric lens, which we mostly got from Western literary views, it just completely misses the point.
Right.
Tenmei-kyōka wasn't work shigoto in the sense of like an individual's creation. It was a movement
English reflective thing.
Yes, and its poets weren't personalities jinkaku. They were temporary disguises kotaku. They sort of beguiled us because they were invisible, which, raises a big question.
Yeah.
What happens to art when the artist deliberately steps back like that?
Well, the source gives that great anecdote, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About what happened later.
Oh, yeah. With Shikatsube Magao, Shokusanjin's successor.
Right. He tried to make kyōka more mainstream by getting rid of the wild aliases, exposing the poets' feeble selves, as the text puts it.
And what happened?
The whole thing just collapsed. That free and capacious world of Tenmei poetry vanished, and you were left with sordid exhibitionists and their second-rate merchandise.
Ouch.
Yeah.
It really shows the delicate genius of those Tenmei poets, though.
It really does. It illustrates that the art's vitality was absolutely tied to that self-effacement, that anonymity, and the sort of dangerous literary network it created. Take that away.
And the magic's gone.
The magic's gone.
Okay, speaking of other influences, this next example really takes things up a notch. We shift to Chinese poetry. Specifically the Tushisen, the selection of Tang poems.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit into this Haikai transformation idea?
Well, for the Edoites, it wasn't just about, understanding a few individual Chinese poems.
Yeah.
It was about a deep familiarity with the entire collection.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of affective sensibility that comes from reciting them over and over.
Okay, a real immersion. Exactly. And this immersion led to the invention of Kishi mad poems in the Chinese style, which, interestingly, also peaked in the Tenmei-era, right alongside Kishka.
Ah, okay. And here we get another one of our core devices, honshidori.
Right.
Which is allusive variation, but this time on a canonical Chinese poem.
So, different from honkadori with the waka.
Exactly. Different source material, same principle of transformation, and the best example the source gives is by Yomo-sanjin.
Which is Shokusanjin again, right? This guy was busy.
He really was. So Yomo-sanjin writes this kishi called Letter to the Lovely Hanaiji.
Okay.
And it's a satirical reworking of a super famous Tang Dynasty quatrain by Wang Changling. The poem is called Seeing Off Xinjian at Hibiscus Pavilion.
Okay, I think I know the original. Isn't that the one about being banished but keeping a pure heart?
That's the one. Wang Changling expresses his unflinching disposition, his heart untainted as ice in a chalice of jade. Very noble, very stoic.
Right. But Yomo-sanjin's poem?
It's about a bon vivant's elation after spending 4 nights with his favorite courtesan in a bordello. What? That's a complete inversion of the whole tone, the context, everything. That's just wild.
This is the Miu, the profound, mysterious quality of the operation, as Ishikawa calls it.
The alchemy.
The alchemy, exactly. Yomo-sanjin magically inverts the meaning of the original poem just by cleverly swapping out some words.
Wow.
And it creates this situation where each poem reflects the other, kind of relativizes the other.
So the reader experiences both at once.
Yes. They would have felt, chills, laughing out loud at how clever the adaptation is, while maybe crying inwardly a little at Wang Changling's original earnest loneliness.
Whoa.
But that whole profound effect, it relies entirely on the reader knowing the original Tang poem intimately.
Right.
Take the kishi out of that dialogic relation with the original, and the art just crumbles. It becomes meaningless.
So this implies the average Edo reader, or at least the intended audience for this stuff, was incredibly literate in these classical texts, both Japanese and Chinese, enough to get these really complex inversions and allusions.
Absolutely. It wasn't just for some tiny elite.
Right.
No, the source gives us another piece of evidence for that. It's from a shurabon, that's a type of Edo chapbook, pretty popular stuff, by Santu Keijin.
Okay.
It's called Rustle of Pillow Talk. And there's this scene where a character, a half-baked sophisticate, is in a bordello.
Yeah.
And he completely misreads a famous Chinese quatrain from the Tushisen that he finds written on a pillow screen.
Okay, and the joke only works if the reader knows the original poem and, the story behind it.
Precisely. Keijin just assumed his readers would recognize the poem and the whole backstory about Emperor Cheng of Han and his spurned concubine, Banjiyu.
Wow.
The humor, the brilliance of the scene comes from mentally superimposing the image of this ancient Han court lady onto this impatient guy in an Edo brothel's waiting room.
That's amazing. It shows just how deep this classical knowledge ran, even in, popular, maybe even lowbrow literature.
It really does. They expected their audience to make these connections, to have that shared cultural vocabulary.
Man, this deep dive has really shown how the Edoites engaged with their world, their traditions.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so different, but also weirdly fresh.
Yeah.
They didn't just consume knowledge. They actively transformed it. They subverted it, played with it, integrated it right into their everyday lives, their pop culture.
And what's really clear from Ishikawa's essay is that reading Edo poetry just by itself, cut off from this whole web of context, this double vision, it means we lose that original urgency. It wasn't about originality in our modern sense of making something totally new from scratch.
Right. It was about inventive transformation. Re-engaging with knowledge everyone shared.
Exactly. Inventive transformation.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've seen how these concepts like atsushi, the lowly disguise, zokuka, vernacularization, an elusive variation like honkadori and honshidori, they allowed the Edoites to find really profound meaning in the mundane, and conversely, to infuse the mundane with the sacred or the classical. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that our own pleasure districts, our pop culture, our everyday lives, they can all be fertile ground for really profound intellectual and artistic creation.
Yeah, if we approach them with the right lens, perhaps. If we look for those connections.
Right.
And it raises this really important question, I think. If Edo literary culture thrived on these invisible authors, on constantly reimagining existing works, what does that say about our own often intense obsession with individual genius, with novelty, with brand newness in art today? Are we maybe missing something by constantly seeking only the new and the singular?
That is definitely something to ponder. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We really hope you walk away with a richer understanding of Edo's truly fascinating literary alchemy and maybe a new way of seeing the profound wisdom that might be hidden in plain sight all around us.